on, I'll be somewhere.
Alright. Can't promise you a long show because I am somewhat dead already, but no reason not to try anyway. And we seem to have some lag issues right now on the office connection here, so apologies if that makes it somewhat less than smooth. Let me know about the sound. Video I can see, but let me know if the sound needs to be adjusted. I think I'm okay with the sound, but how is it possible to play with Peter? You challenge Paul Borta on the site. You can mouse over my mouse over my nickname, I assume, and then there should be an option to challenge. Yeah, and people in chat are very helpful that way, so they will tell you what to do. Anyway, as I said, after 2 hours of, well, 2.5 hours of doing Blitz commentary, I'm losing my speaking abilities very fast. So let's play some chess. What do we have here? And the moment I tweeted something, which also included a typo apparently, which I'm very unhappy about. I'm very normally I'm very serious about avoiding typos. There was a typo in there, but yeah, I immediately got a reply from Lawrence suggesting there should be a rematch. Lawrence, I think, feels very strongly that he should not be in the minus against me on Chess24. I know how you feel, brother, but I mean, if I see him in the list, I will play against Lawrence, but the list is already like 80 challenges long, can't promise anything. Okay. Seems like we're getting somewhere. I haven't looked at this properly in a while, but I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to do here. Like, I played a3 instantly, and now I'm starting to think, which is not the prescribed order of things, frankly. I think maybe the immediate before might be stronger, but it shouldn't matter a great deal. He's also playing very fast, which is worrying me. I think his next move is, like, if I make some kind of a normal move here, like knight bg2 or g3, he plays f6. And I might be a bit slow. Which is why I'm contemplating playing b5, but b5 is just not a very pleasant move to make. Don't wanna do it. I need to play c4 as early as possible to start challenging his center here. And yeah, if he plays f6, once again, if I allow e5 and d4, I'm just completely lost, which is why I need to start challenging his structure immediately. But I'm not sure my position is great. Knight g5 and knight c5 in particular are worrying me currently quite a bit. Although I do have, like, if he plays knight to e5, I can take twice. And once he takes with the f pawn, I have the c4, c5 move, which stops his pressure against the f2 pawn, which I think is very important here. Yeah, and Dingliran is rated higher than I am. I thought that was extremely unlikely that I was the highest rated player in Hante. And thanks for that clarification, Gifted Ape. I can take and play c5, but frankly, I don't much like my position there because he just goes bishop c7. If I play something like queen h5, he goes e4. And I'd much rather play his position than mine there. Bishop e2 is extremely slow, but like on strategic grounds, I like it better. Maybe even bishop c2. Bishop c2 is a bit weird. I'm not refuting the opening here, that's quite clear, but it might be playable. If he goes d4, I go c5, bishop c7, and either knight f3 or knight c4. I haven't decided yet. Probably knight c4. And try to drive his pieces away. At least he's thinking. The speed with which he played the opening was definitely worrisome. Okay, that just blundered a piece, right? He can play queen d5 and I have to resign. Yeah, not surprising. This is why I should have played knight f3, obviously. And as usual, the realization that you've done something wrong comes 5 seconds too late. Or maybe even just castle first. Yeah. This is going to be a difficult session. Frankly, just resigning is fine here. I'll play on for a bit, but there's no real reason to. I mean, there are some traps, but like I'm sort of threatening bishop takes c4 and queen g4 check. But yeah, in general, this position is just utterly lost for white. Queen takes d4, queen e2. His pieces are a little bit awkwardly placed. So I think I'm justified in continuing for a while, because after rook a d1 he will have, I think, only awkward squares available for the queen. And the bishop on c8 is still a bit dead. So I think I'm not entirely unreasonable in continuing here. He has queen takes a1, but then I can take on e6 and I have 2 pawns for the piece. And yes, objectively black probably is still winning, but you can play on. His king is a lot weaker than mine, and I do have some counterplay here. Although, as mentioned, I mean, objectively, of course, 3 pieces against 1. Yes, my piece is a queen, but it is, sort of more importantly, it is 3 pieces against 1. And that generally is a winning advantage, because they just overwhelm the queen eventually. And I'm creating a weakness which he probably will just pick apart. Like, I will create a passed pawn on the c-file, which will then be picked up and I will lose the game. But I don't quite like what he's doing. This actually is giving me a ton of extra chances. This might be not entirely horrible now. I could also take the BC, but then rook a7, for instance, just stops my passer completely. And yeah, here I suddenly have 3 pawns for the piece, and the 2 of them are connected passed pawns on the queen side. Together with, I could have played queen d6, but he gets bishop e5 anyway, and I want to connect my pawns first. I need to set some traps here, but his king is weak enough that I have enough, yeah, and now I'm actually suddenly completely winning. That will be an undeserved victory, but the position wasn't totally lost. It was, like, I think it was in the beginning, but from here I do have some hopes for a draw. Obviously not for a win, but some hopes for a draw. And missing queen d5 was, of course, unnecessary. Okay, what shall we play here? Let's play the modern, because I play a lot of Sicilians in these Banters. Not that I don't play moderns at all, but I play a lot of Sicilians, and I get... It's not that it's, you know, very easy to get bored by Sicilians, but I feel I should give other openings a chance. This is a very, very decent setup against modern, actually. More people should do this with white. It's, I think, very, very underrated. And extremely unpleasant to play against as well, because you just don't get what you normally aim for in the modern when your opponent plays bishop c4 queen e2, because white is basically aiming for positions you normally see more often in the Alekhine, when black plays d6 and then immediately takes d takes e5, and black's position is just passive and unpleasant, like what I got here, for instance, because this bishop on c8 is just a horrible, horrible piece, which is incredibly difficult to find any future for. And in his spot, I would actually waste a tempo on h2, h3, just to make sure that black has no option to wanted to blunder a pawn there. I will refrain from doing that. Not that this position is great, but I think once I manage to trade off my light squared bishop, the remaining pieces work a lot better. It's still unpleasant, and white is still, of course, the side pushing the action here. And I'm playing e6, e5 straight away. I'm not sure if it's tactically correct. It might... what? That seems weird. Okay, I don't really understand what happened there. I mean, my opponent is 26-12, and he just gave me, like, successfully. Already here I could take a piece. I decided to be greedy and take a piece to the next move, and then he played bishop g5, which looked like a pre-move, but it's not a good pre-move against any of my moves. That was extremely weird. I don't know what that was. I really don't. Okay, let's spend 30 seconds looking for Lawrence. He might be in there. But I can't see him yet. There's a lot of names I recognize, but was that Lawrence? No, that was Lawrence Trend, which is a sort of close but no cigar option. Yeah, I saw you, Lawrence. But yeah, I was looking for the real deal. The one, the only. I don't know why I'm playing the Catalan. I don't know what I'm doing here at all. But I can fake it with the best of them. The point of playing queen a4 here is that it rules out queen c2 b5, which used to be a line for a while. But it also doesn't allow you to play a6 after a4 after a6. And this is a very, very decent recent line that people have started playing. Bishop e4 followed by c6, followed by a normal developing move, like maybe even knight bd7 here, and then the bishop goes to g6. I like this approach a great deal. I think it's very interesting. Not that, once again, not that I know much about the opening in general. This opening, I mean, I don't know something about some openings, but just not the Catalan. This was played by, I think this was played in the game between Hoi Fan and Jon Ludwig Hammer in the Moscow Grand Prix. I'm not sure how she reacted though. I'm trying to trade off, similarly to the previous game, this bishop on d2 doesn't really do very much, so I'm trying to spend 2 tempi just to trade it off for something. And I'm also obviously extremely concerned about c6, c5 coming and black equalizing on the spot, but it doesn't seem like I will be able to do much about that thing. Maybe if I take and play b4, but it kind of looks like a plan to lose, not a plan to win. I currently don't have anything better to do though, so I'll go with that. I do play the reti occasionally, Smugs, and I will try keeping an eye on Banter, but it's I mean on chat, but it's difficult during games. I will pay a lot more attention to it in between games. If he takes, I'm saying, you know, I've just assumed the gender there. Please don't fire me. Yeah, if black takes with the bishop on f6, b4 is one move. I could also still play knight e5, but I didn't really like that option. What is there to comment about rook g1? Rook g1 more or less wins, and it has been shown to us by the genius that is Anish Giri, so there's really not a lot I can say to X-Max. You just should win from that position, not, I mean, especially once you're given exchange odds, you should not do what I did. And like start fighting for equality very soon after being given a full exchange. Yeah, it seems like black will be able to achieve what he is trying to achieve in general in these lines, which is regrettable, but at least maybe I can try to assume control over the a file here. Black probably plays c5 anyway, but I can hopefully, although now I realize that my plan of taking a takes b5 might lose to c takes d4 and there's a pin on the c file, I will have to calculate there. I could still be able to play that, but that will require very precise calculation. And if he plays c5, ab5, ab5, at least I have the a file to console myself. I take, he takes, I take on a6, he probably needs to play queen. It's a weird position. I might be able to do it. And just as with the previous question, Auric, TUT, there's not a lot to say about Magnus's performances in the Blitz. I mean, in this particular Blitz tournament, he just absolutely destroyed the field. You've seen it yourself. What is there to say? He is extremely good at Blitz, which is, I think, the relevant part. I wanted to play d5, but I'm kind of wondering if that's being over-ambitious. I think I should probably do this. And then this. But this really isn't me fighting for advantage. I don't believe I have any. It's just me making moves more than anything else. I think queen h5 may be mildly over-ambitious. Even g4, g5, but then he has knight h5. Knight e4 also looks very attractive. This suddenly gives me a lot of ideas. I don't think that was a particularly good move. Might be good enough, but just leave it there on g6 where I can take it, and the position will simplify and probably equalize itself. I don't really see why black needed to give me all these tactical options. Bishop takes e2, I have knight d7, I also have rook d7. I also, if I want to, have even bishop takes h7 followed by queen e4 check and queen takes e2. And I'm apparently calling pieces by their wrong names, which is only to be expected. Commenting on Blitz is hard, and in general I'm not as fresh as I sometimes am. Queen b8 is a decent move. After knight d7, now he takes, he goes rook e8, and I don't seem to win any material. The pawn on e2 is still hanging, and there might be a threat of bishop d6. I like this move. Shows great spatial awareness. I'm very tempted to try and do something weird here. Basically, f5 might be very strong. f5 I have to play... I have to play knight d7 and hope that the complications favor me. If he goes bishop takes e2, once again I have knight d7. This is a move I wasn't worried about because I once again have knight d7 here. And this probably wins me material. That was like the cleanest outcome of all the things that could happen after queen g5. I might, if he takes with the h-pawn, I might even go for full greed once again and go rook ac1, but I think I should just take on f8. And here, of course, I should take on f8 because this is just a very easily technically winning position. I'm in a full exchange up, and also my structure is better. I just need not to blunder something immediately, which should generally be possible. By playing queen f4, I just want to transfer the queen to a better square and then go rook d2. He will play something like queen f7 or queen f6 here, and then I will go rook d2, and the queen is a lot better on e4. It's a lot more harmonious on e4 than it was on g5, and he realizes that and doesn't even go queen f7 or queen f6. But now my pieces start coming, and I'll stop talking because I kind of don't want to lose this game on time. Okay. But yeah, I think the start of black's problems was the decision to go bishop h5. If you play something normal like rook f d8, black is just fine. I don't think I have anything at all. I have equality if I wanted by trading everything off, but I don't think I have any pressure particularly. And I'm not sure if I'm already better here, but at least suddenly black needs to solve concrete problems. Okay. Rook a8 after queen b8 is something I completely failed to consider. That's a good spot. That's a good spot, Adam. Queen b8, knight d7 I discussed on air. I don't think it wins. Because black swaps queens and then goes rook f8, and I couldn't see anything decisive there. Okay. Random opening number 2. e5 might not be the best move here in terms of getting an interesting position, because what they do here is they play d3, d4. If my opponent doesn't play d3, d4, then I don't really regret my life choices here. I have not read a backpack, a bear, and 8 crates of vodka. I don't even know if that's a real thing or you're trolling me. Sounds like an interesting book, but was not aware of its existence. I'm kind of tempting him to go d3, d4 more or less on every move, but he doesn't seem interested. And after b3, I have a feeling at some point I will be playing d5, d4 here. And I wonder, because I will at some point have to do that, if maybe I should just do it immediately. Because otherwise his pressure on my center will just become too unpleasant. Yeah, and this is all very standard. He still gets a very, very playable position, of course. This is a, perfectly reasonable King's Indian with colors reversed and an extra tempo for my opponent. In some positions, it might not be the most stupid idea in the world to go knight g6 and allow him to take. But I kind of have to deal with this potential f2, f4. I'm not sure I have particularly good ways of dealing with it though. Whilst the knight is on h4, he probably cannot recapture with the g-pawn, which is what I'm most afraid of. Something like f4, ef, gf. I should have knight takes e4 shots because the knight on e4 will be hanging. But he could, for instance, play knight f5 here, and I'm not sure if I can take. And if I don't take, then f4 becomes very strong on the next move. Or queen e1. Once again, this is a very typical move which I quite like from my opponent because it protects the knight on h4 for the future, allowing him to play f4 on the next move. Let's maybe push some of his pieces away. At least this way we might distract him from what he's doing on the king side for a while. I still kind of dislike my position though, because f4, you know, we haven't really achieved much. We've driven the knight back to d2, which is sort of good because the bishop on c1 is now locked in. But the underlying problems are still there. Okay, there's a line I've been trying to calculate for the past 30 seconds, which I will not try to play. Yeah, I was kind of worried about knight takes g6, but knight f5 is also perfectly reasonable, of course. But now f4 is not a threat, so maybe I can actually play queen d7. Because with the knight on d2, I actually have more pieces attacking the f4 square than he has protecting. I'm not threatening to take on f5 just yet, but I might at some point start threatening it if I solve the issue of the pawn on c6 hanging. Tried keeping up with chat, but I think it kind of ran away with me, from me. I mean, there is some very harsh words about Kramnik in there, which I had to scroll a long way up to understand. I'll play a5 here. The move doesn't really achieve much, but what I want to do is to free up the rook on a8 to do something useful with its life. And with the pawn on a7, I would constantly have to worry about white taking on b5 and taking on a7. On a5, this pawn is protected, and I'm now free to play something like rook a d8. Not that rook a d8 in particular, you know, makes a ton of sense right now, but it's useful to have the option of doing it later in the game. I don't really like this h4 move because this allows me the option of playing knight e7 and forcing this trade. And now, you know, there is even an argument for going b4, but I don't want to lock in the queen side so early. And if he plays f4, this knight on f6 might land on e3. So I think we kind of weathered the early storm here, and this should be an okay position for me, I suspect. I think trading off the duck, well, I just blundered the a5 pawn. Everything I said about the pawn on a7 still applies to the pawn on a5 as well. I don't know what I'm doing. It's been a long day. Okay, so I now have the option of not losing the a5 pawn if I want, which I probably do want. I mean, I can just bluff it and play some normal move and assume he doesn't see that he can win the a5 pawn by taking on b5, but that feels weird. Actually, I'll do that because I do get some positional counterplay there, especially with the inclusion of knight h2, bishop d7. I can get some counterplay against the c2 pawn here. Okay, he finally spots it, but if he wanted to play it, it was obviously a lot stronger to play on the previous move. Now my pawn on b5 is not hanging, and I have various sources of potential counterplay here. Not that my position is great, it's not, but this is a lot less clear than it would have been on the previous move. I quite like this from him though. Not trying to hold onto the c2 pawn sort of passively, but opening up the king side and also creating the f2 square for the rook. That is a good move. I can throw in queen b1 check on the next move to force him to play bishop f1. Not that bishop f1 is such a horrible move, but I think it kind of disbalances his position a little bit. The queen on b1 is a horrible piece though, that's for sure. Which is why I was not at all sure this was such a great idea. Yeah, this is still not a good position at all, obviously. This is connected with the idea of landing the bishop on d1 and then finally collecting the pawn on c2. This was the only source of counterplay I could find, but it might not be that horrible. It might actually give me enough play here to be okay. Potentially even better than okay, because if the white king side, queen side starts falling, it might fall like in its entirety. Both the c2 and the b3 pawns are very in a lot of danger here. And also, yeah, I'm ahead on time, but I still probably should stop talking if I want to not misplay this horribly. Okay. The b-pawn is quite dangerous here, but my king is not very safe. Bishop h3 is probably a good move here. I won on time. Yeah, I didn't really want to win on time, but bishop f5 is not the immediate draw that maybe my opponent thought it was. And here I wanted to play queen d2, creating a threat of queen e1 check. I have at least a draw here because bishop f5 g6 is just one check. I guess he just makes a draw with bishop takes g6 though, and then a perpetual. Yeah, this probably has to be a draw. But yeah, somewhere here, I mean, I blundered the a5 pawn, so I'm definitely at least slightly worse here. Okay, let's play some somewhat lower rated people. Congrats, Polis Pastas, and yeah, Priest looks playable these days. And I got my Golden Priest portrait, I think in the month of October last year, when it was completely unplayable, and then they improved the class drastically, so I was incredibly pissed off at Blizzard at that point. Because like the last 100 games I needed to win with Priest were such torture. And immediately after I was done with that, the class became viable again. I felt that was completely unfair. I don't know what a6 is though. You should play bishop f5 in this position. You really, I mean, the whole point of the Scandinavian is that you want to play the Caro-Kann where your bishop gets out. And then suddenly you just lock the bishop in. That makes no sense. I'm not sure I'm justified in this, but I wanna wait until he castles kingside and then go for something direct on the kingside and try to give mate. Continuing in the same vein, once again, I'm not sure if these are the best moves in the position, but establishing this knight on e5 in general cannot be a bad move, I think. Might not be the best move, but it's never really horrible to make sure you have this knight on e5 supported by 2 pawns. You... yeah, okay, I probably shouldn't rise to that. But... Hiladi describing what he did as beating me the last time is triggering me somewhat. And yeah, this is not the right way. I mean, I understand the knight is annoying, but by giving me the open f file and you know, all the dark squares I can eat, is not going to improve your position very much. I mean, if the knight actually is magically transported from b8 to d5, the position becomes somewhat playable for black. Or, yeah, I probably should have stopped this. Definitely should have stopped this. This is a very good spot by my opponent. This is now a lot less clear than it was a moment ago. I will try to prevent my opponent from castling queenside here. I don't know if I have to, but I think if he castles kingside, he probably still gets mated. But if he castles queenside and then survives, the position does become unclear. Which is why I am specifically fighting against that idea and not the idea of him castling kingside. If he goes g5, at least I have forced him to weaken his position somewhat. Yeah, the knight goes to c7 and d5, but here I thought I can start harassing him on the king side by playing, let's start with queen g4, he goes g5. I like this sequence. He's inviting me to play queen g4 in order to meet it with g5. And then he will have options. I'm probably still better though, but yeah, that's very clever by my opponent. I'm looking at some ideas to kind of try and solve the game by tactical means here, but they don't seem to work. Like I can play queen g4, g5, rook takes f7, and I do win some material back, but it doesn't seem to win. I got somewhat complacent, I think, here. I'm doing this once again to fight specifically against the idea of him castling queenside. He probably needs to play something like rook a7, but then I achieved two things. First, it's impossible for him to castle queenside if the rook has moved, and second, I'm stopping knight c7 because the protection of the f7 pawn kind of gets in the way. More fake news from Hiladi. The worst but defendable endgame was an endgame like when we had about 25 seconds left each. He was a piece down and his entire structure was collapsing. I wanted to go either rook d3 or rook f3 here. I don't know which one is stronger. Let's go with rook f3. I want to double on the f file. And yeah, he does get some counterplay here, but There is rook g3, which I quite like, but rook takes d4 requires calculation. But I think that might be a good move. Because I think if he goes g6 I can take, which is very important. And also with the queen on h5, if he goes g5 I can take with either piece. And after rook d4 I can take on g7 and then take on d1 with the queen. Yeah, I've seen that story about Pragnanda's opponent casting. This has happened a ton of times in the history of chess, and it's not necessarily cheating. People just forget they moved their rook. I mean, it's extremely annoying to lose a game like this in a rated tournament, because I think that the way the rules work, if you don't notice it immediately, the game stands, which is the annoying bit. But yeah, rook f6 may have been interesting, but not that easy to spot if it worked. Yeah, and here I thought I can just... There's also rook df1, as I now realize, which might be very strong, if I'm not missing any checks. But my original intention is also, I think, close to winning, so I'll stick with it. Because this king is now completely stuck. That's kind of the point of what I'm doing. The simplest threat I have here is just bishop f6 followed by rook g3, d3 or something. And now I'm threatening queen d8 mate, which I think he has no reply to. Yeah. Okay. More white games. Getting a ton of white games today. Ah, the old enemy, the French. I will go to great length not to play the normal French. Not quite sure why I'm playing f4 here and not something more reasonable, but can't be horrible. I don't quite like bishop c5, though. I don't really understand what that does. I mean, d3, d4 is not bad, but I can also just ignore it. Don't really see what that achieves. Let's just ignore it for now. I might have to address it at some point, though. Because I would like to castle kingside, obviously, and bishop e3 is possible, but a bit sad. Might have to do it, though. Knight comes out to g2. It's actually a reasonably harmonious setup. I'm not sure I like him taking on e4 here, to be honest. I think the pawn on f5 was a very important wave breaker for whatever it is that I'm planning to do on the king side. And now his king side looks a lot weaker compared to what it was a moment ago. I'll spend the tempo on something like either c3 or a3 so that I don't have to calculate knight b4 ever again. I think it's too early for knight b3. I want to wait until he plays d5, if he plays d5, and then the knight goes to b3 and c5. But in general, I want to sort of stabilize in the center and then start something like h4, h5, g4, f5. I'm not much better, but I think my structure is a bit more flexible, so I should have some pressure here. Yeah, I'm not sure if... I kind of want to play h4, but on the other hand, I'm not sure if I have to. I'll do it because it might sort of scare my opponent into doing something rash that he doesn't have to. But I'm not sure if I'm actually achieving very much by doing this. h5, I mean, the knight goes to h8, and then it goes to f7, then it goes to h6. It's not horrible for black. But sort of h4 is the cutoff point. I don't have to play h5. He might have to go knight h8 anyway, so I'm bringing my pieces in for the time being. Maybe a4 was a move I could consider there as well. I'm not sure what knight a5 is though. That seems weird. Like if my opponent sort of specifically asks me to win two tempi, and yeah, this I really don't like from him. This has to be clearly wrong. At the very least, I'm winning the c4 pawn now. And there's probably even bigger issues with what he's doing, but this looks like the most obvious reply, so I'll go with that for the time being. I hope you mean the opening and not my way of presenting the material. I throw rocks. I tried to make it, you know, as palatable as possible, but the opening is very difficult. There can be no doubt about that. And yeah, the plan of the knight going all the way to h6 and then maybe even g4 is, as you can see, is still in place, which is, you know, I need to address it somehow. I'm not sure if this is great, but it's a concrete way of hopefully opening up some files, which I think should benefit me here. I need files for my rooks basically, because my kingside position is well, somewhat weakened. I like his decision to just completely ignore the e5 pawn. This is actually not such a clear position at all, because of the fact that this pawn is on h5. If it was on, let's say, h3, I would think that this is a very easily convertible extra pawn for white. But with a pawn on h5, you always feel like there will be some counterplay for my opponent. Yeah. And I will refer you to my previous statement. If I have to play g4, there will, once again, there will always be something I will need to be very careful about. So I would very much like to avoid playing g4 here. It's just not a very nice move to make aesthetically. But I might have to. I'm trying to tempt him to play d6, d5 here, which he doesn't need to do, but it will make my structure immediately a lot more stable. Even after that he will have compensation, but he doesn't have to. And I want to play c3, c4, but on the previous move queen c6 check was a very, very valid reason not to do that. So I didn't. c4 queen b4 is a bit annoying, so I will spend one more tempo on preparing my moves. And then we will see what's what. But in general, I kind of want to push c3, c4, but I want to protect my pieces as much as possible before I do that. d5 followed by, I don't know, queen a4 and a5 gives him counterplay on the queen side. And my biggest issue here is that, in particular, if black plays d6, d5 here, I think my win will probably have to be connected with opening something up on the king side. And that's just sort of a scary thought to contemplate. I'm taking on d6 because I want to meet, yeah, exactly. That was exactly the reason why I took on d6, because I needed to have queen takes e6 as a reply to queen h4, which I think maybe my opponent missed, or maybe he thought he can take on f4 here, but the pawn is pinned. Yeah, now I should be completely winning, because now I finally stabilized. I can play rook h1 and drive the queen away. I can also just start collecting stuff. I think there is no real reason for me not to go for greed here. Although I have a feeling that was actually a mistake. I missed rook f6 when I did all this. Rook f6 is a bit annoying. I have queen e2, but I probably should have driven the queen away from h4 before doing all that. It's an annoying piece. I can play f5 though, next move. And that should kill off most of his counterplay. And here I have to calculate, but something might just win. Rook g8 might be an annoying move to meet. But I think I have rook g5. Whoops. Okay, the rook endgame is of course completely lost for my opponent, but I think after rook f6 I probably had mate. But here I'm just two pawns up for nothing. I think after rook f6 I should have some kind of mate here. The game still continues because he's threatening queen takes g4, but yeah, I should be winning. I don't see it immediately, but I should be winning here somehow. If all else fails, I can play something like queen d4, but it's an annoying move to make. It's like so inconcrete, but it might be good. Just queen d4 using all the pins, creating a threat of rook d6. But mainly I think my opponent just missed queen takes d6 in this position, and that made, like here I'm not entirely sure I'm much better. I should be slightly better because I have more pawns, but I'm not much better. And here I'm just winning. So those two moves just made his position go sharply downhill. Okay, I can't say for sure how many more, but not very many more, because I do feel tired-ish. So we played the Caro, we played the Modern. I think it's time to stop pretending and start playing the Sicilian. Which Sicilian though? Let's go for maybe the Najdorf. I can try playing bishop d7 in honor of what Magnus did in the Blitz, but let's stick with normal openings. I should have played bishop d7. g3. No, please no. Okay. Now with the whining done, let's play. I think in general g3 against the dragon is supposed to be quite decent if black already wasted a tempo on a6. This is not a move black needs to be making in these structures. In many cases it will transpose, but in general black hopes to go knight c6 and then rook b8, not a6. Because you still need to go rook b8 in most situations in these lines. I don't really play the Sveshnikov. I sort of don't understand it with either color. Taking an a5 is not at all horrible here. Might be quite unpleasant objectively. I don't know why my opponent is allowing me both knight a5 and knight c5 here. It feels like I should not be given this much freedom. This is as decent a version of the knight e5 positions as I'm likely to get in this line, because he cannot play b3, the rook is already on c8. Normally you would very much like to play b2, b3 in this position, and then just move the knight away and try to play c2, c4. But with the rook on c8, the knight might actually land on c4, should actually land on c4, which makes his life, at least in the immediate future, somewhat awkward. Yeah, knight g5 is very critical. I can take, play knight c4, he probably goes bishop c1, I can play queen b6, attacking the knight on d4, attacking the pawn on b2, but I'm not sure I will be able to take on b2 if he just plays c3. And it's hugely critical for me to be able to take on b2 there, because if I can't do it, the whole line doesn't make sense. But my current thinking is I might be able to. I can also, to make sure all of this happens, I can start with knight c4 and only take here. I think this way, because if I started with the capture, he could maybe just give up his dark squared bishop in order to preserve the structure. And my current thinking is c3 knight takes b2 works. And if it does work, then of course I should be going for this line, because you know, it collapses his entire queenside structure. a5, there's a number of moves I can make. I can take on d1 and on c3. I can also play queen takes d4 if he plays a5, which is a cute little geometrical motif, which it's important to notice it exists in a ton of positions. And here I thought queen takes c3 is just very, very strong, because I now will pick up the knight on d4, and not only will I pick up this knight, I will also have a very strong attack against his kingside, because this is just such a monstrous bishop on d4. Should go rook b1, because rook a2 I could even go queen takes g3, and after queen takes d4 I would go rook c1 mate. But in this position it seems like I don't have the immediate win, so I should pay attention. I think this is a nice little trappy move. Rook d6, bishop f2 wins, because I then have queen c5 check, and rook b5 I think queen g3 wins. So I think I've created a situation in which he doesn't really have a, you know, a comfortable way of dealing with my threats. I think. Maybe something like queen f3. But yeah, this is an important tactic which I described when we were talking about rook a2, and it still works here. And even if he doesn't get mated in the immediate future, I will just play something like queen f4, bishop b5, and I will be strategically completely winning. This should be mate of some sort. Okay. A 3-minute challenge, which means that this will be somewhat faster paced. If it ever starts, obviously. I don't know why I always play c5 in this position. It's some kind of a mental leak I have. And this is going to be a very good Volga for my opponent. Yeah, this has not been particularly well played by me. Or a pretty decent Reti as well, but I would have gone for the more forceful Volga. He could have played b4 straight away there without all these preparations. Not that he's doing horribly right now, it's a perfectly fine position for him anyway. More than fine. I mean, it's supposed to be completely fine for black, even with white having one more tempo. This is very close to what we've seen today in the... Yeah, I'm not sure about this though. I mean, it's a very possible way of dealing with the issues here, but I think in general they try to play knight e4 and not give me this structure. But even this, like, I'm not sure I should like my position all that much, frankly. It's playable, but it's not great. Knight e4 followed by c5, for instance, is a very serious issue here. And I have to deal with bishop g5, so I have to spend the tempo on this. And now c5 is extremely annoying. Like, I need to figure out a way of dealing with this which doesn't involve me giving up a ton of squares. Yeah, after knight d6, I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to do. I have knight, yeah, with the rook on a6, I don't even have knight takes c5. I was about to say I have knight takes c5, but now I actually don't. Rook a6 in that respect was just completely counterproductive. Don't really like the way I've been playing the past few moves. f4 now is very dangerous, but I'm hoping to go bishop e6, fe, knight g4, and sort of I'm now actively aiming for some kind of mayhem. And my opponent, quite smartly, I think, is not planning to allow me any particular mayhemy continuations. Probably should play queen c4 here to stop knight d5. Yeah, I like what he's doing. I think he's doing everything more or less exactly like he should be. You know, I dislike my position enough to contemplate playing e4, but I don't think it works tactically, which is regrettable. I don't know what this move is, but it might become useful at a later date. This is not the sound of the wind. This is the sound of, I think, air conditioner. Yeah, bishop b2. I just noticed that bishop c6 and rook e5 was an option for my opponent a moment ago, and so I probably should address that. But how is the question. I can play knight a5, but it's horrible. Yeah, this is still a very, very unpleasant position. Mighty unpleasant. Also have no time. I just spotted a tactic which I think wasn't there a moment ago, so I will try to go for that. Yeah, if that works, that helps me a great deal, obviously, because I win the piece back without... I think I can take with this rook. Without losing the e5 pawn. I don't particularly care about the b7 pawn. I do care a great deal about the e5 pawn, though. And now if the bishop goes away, rook a b5 wins material. I'll also stop talking because once again losing on time annoys me. Okay. I probably shouldn't lose this on time if I'm sort of a normal person, but not really a normal person. Yeah, I'm not even sure I'm winning anymore, and I'm definitely losing this on time if we continue, so I offer the draw there. Obviously I was in a lot of trouble. Just as obviously somewhere here I'm completely winning, but I kind of panicked because I obviously don't need to allow him to trade one of the bishops for the knight, but I somehow felt this was winning, and maybe it already isn't. I'm not sure this is winning. Might still be winning even in the final position, but converting from here on 14 seconds is I don't really have a shot. So fair enough, I think, considering just how unpleasant my position was out of the opening. C4, knight f6. How do we not get bored here? That should be the challenge. It's not that easy. Okay. Probably not gonna get bored here. Let's go the whole hog. I used to know a little bit of something about the 4 pawns, but that was ages ago. Okay, I don't really know anything about bishop g4 though. I mean, I used to study what was considered to be the main line, which was rook e85 takes, knight g4, bishop g5, and so on and so forth. But these positions, I suspect, are just completely fine for black. And also you're probably advised to know something about them before playing them, and I don't. I suspect I already made a mistake. It's probably better to play g4 immediately and start something on the king side as early as possible. But I wanted to play bishop b3, and I wanted to stop knight takes e4 as a reply, because I think if the moment I play bishop b3, if the bishop on e3 is not protected by something, I get completely run over by knight takes e4 tactics. So I wanted to stop that from happening. But now he will just play b5. I would actually, on aesthetic grounds, prefer b5 to b6. I don't know why he played b6. But it kind of leads to the same, obviously. There's not a great deal of difference. And yeah, black has a very comfortable position, I suspect. Tons of counterplay on the queen's side. The bishop is still kind of useless on c1. And the way the pieces are positioned, I'm never going to get any kind of play connected with the e5 breaks, which I think is how white becomes better in this structure. If my knight already was on c4, it would be a completely different story, of course, but I don't think I'm getting it from c3 to c4 in this game. I could try, but I don't really believe in it. And also, if I could play rook e1, a1 in this position, that would be better. But once again, I don't see how this is happening. I could try something weird. Well, a little bit weird, but I don't know. I can still play g4, but I don't like it. And I'm wondering if I should play bishop e3 and just aim for this endgame. But he is not forced to give me the endgame, which is what is worrying me. But I'll give him the option. At least it might make him think. If he takes on b2, I take on a6, and the pawn on d6 is hanging. And some endgames are quite decent for white in these structures. Not all endgames, but some endgames are. For instance, if all 4 rooks are gone, I think white could be doing quite well. But I mean, obviously, all 4 rooks are not going to get traded. Queen b3 is a move, but I have rook a3, I thought, which might help me stabilize. Queen c4 loses a rook, so I don't have queen c4 as a reply to queen b3. But yeah, in general, I mean, allowing this is a bit of a suicide play. It's not generally all that great to allow black to take on b2 in these structures. Yeah, and here I thought I can play rook c1 and sort of stabilize for the... Oh, knight takes e4. Yeah. As usual, I spot a tactic. First of all, I gave all this... I gave a beautiful speech about how badly I need a rook on c1 in these positions. I also completely missed this, but I think this actually is not as great as the other option because of rook takes d6. I think knight takes e4 there was a lot stronger than this. Might still be okay though for black. Yeah, and this is the critical test, but I think I'm emerging with a position which is like ever so slightly better for me here because of how awkward his knight on d7 is. I might be like a bit justified in continuing here. I could also just take on d4 and go rook d3, which was probably stronger actually. I don't know why well, king f2 is just like, your hand just plays king f2 here. But the other option was probably stronger. Yeah. No, this actually makes me, I think objectively I should be very interested now. Especially after knight of 6e5, because I think I'm getting a 4 against 3, and I'm also, this will be a very, very good version of a 4 against 3 here. Because he kind of forced himself into playing knight h5. He's absolutely driven himself into a corner here. And after that I can take on h5. And I even have a choice between king f3 and rook d4, rook d3, which wins the pawn but allows f6. But king f3 allows him to put his rook behind the pawn, which I'm in general very much against. This is a tough one. I'll go with the materialistic approach, but I have a feeling this is a mistake. I don't see why he's played rook d8 though. I think that just wastes his time. I think he needed to play f6 as early as possible. And allowing my king to get to f5 was, I think, very suboptimal, because now I think I'm just objectively winning. This is a fantastic version of an endgame that, for instance, Levon won against Hikaru in the Moscow candidates. Like an absolutely fantastic, totally improved version. And here I can, I think, even pick up a second one, because I have e6. I also have f5. I'm not sure if I should play e6, because I think f5 is just stronger here. After e6, king f6, I'm not sure I'm winning. After f5, on the other hand, I do feel like I should be winning by force. I don't know if he needed to resign. He could go king e8, rook e7, king f8, like rook a7, king e8. I'm still not entirely sure I've done the right thing. But it feels like I should be winning after something like king h6 here. Okay, so we're close to 90 minutes in. So let's say this one and one more. Because I would very much like to, at some point, get a bit of a breather, because there's a reasonably grueling schedule ahead of us. The team championship, well, it's very difficult to judge with these things, but I think the early favorites should be China, Ukraine, and us. Because the US, which is an absolute powerhouse these days, is forced to bring a team, I think, without the top 3, which obviously makes them a great deal weaker, without any of Hikaru, Wesley, and Fabi. I'm not sure why I played e5 here. I'm beginning to sort of actively dislike this choice. Should have just played something like g3 and waited. I can play c4, knight db4 and some move, but My idea was to play g3, but it just doesn't give me anything. I really, really dislike my choice there. I think I've committed to e4, e5 way too early. I could have easily waited for a number of moves there. Bishop f6 is a decent idea here, but I felt reasonably sure that my opponent will just automatically recapture on d6. So you could call this a bit of a semi-bluff. Not that it's a bad move, but I think bishop f6 was at the very least worth considering. Probably should have played a4 there. That was also a bit of a tick. Although the immediate b5 knight e5 might be a bit awkward for black, because I do, if he, especially in particular if he trades on e5, the pin along, well, not the pin, but there will be a threat of c2, c4 is what I was trying to say. Okay, let's go a4. I'm sort of hinting of I might play knight b5, knight g5 later on, but it's just gaining space. I'm not really creating any threats as such. But if, let's say, he plays e6, e5, knight g5 becomes a reasonably serious idea because it creates all kinds of potential tactics connected with the fact that the knight on d5 is a bit unprotected. But mainly I'm just trying to gain space for the future. It might become useful because my play, yeah, e5 is an important resource, and sort of this is specifically why I played knight g5. So I should follow through with my original intention. I'm not sure what, I mean, I have a threat of, in some positions queen d3 might become a threat, in particular if he plays f6 here. Queen d3 is an interesting idea. There is also knight takes h7, but the thing about knight takes h7 is that it doesn't actually threaten anything, so he is not forced to recapture. But this I think is very strong. Although I just spotted that if he takes on g5, if I take on d5 with the queen, he has bishop e6, which is a good move. So even here I'm not nearly as much better as I thought originally. I'm still better though. It's probably the best move. Just take on d8, take on g5. If he wants to take on c4 and take on d2, yes, he can do that. But then I will have tremendous bishops. And his light pieces are, you know, very far from ideal. If he wants to go knight d4, I can take on b7. I also want to play d2, d3 next move, stabilizing my position in the center. For instance, if he does something like this. And now I'm a reasonably healthy pawn up, it feels like. The lag and buffering is very real, people say in chat. I really don't think I can do very much about that, sorry. Once the knight lands on e4, obviously my conversion becomes almost automatic here. So he should try doing something about it, but there's really not a lot he can do. He can play knight a4, knight b4 back, but there's a number of ways I can deal with this. He can play c4 here, but I will just take twice. 2 pawns up. I understand they're doubled pawns, but they are 2 pawns up, so very hard to be upset about that. That's a reasonable move. I can play knight d6 and pick up on b5. That would be one possible reaction to this. I would like to fight for the a file, but I don't really see how. I can play bishop c3, but then he goes rook a2, forces me to take on b4, and I'm stuck with this horribly weak pawn on c2, which I kind of dislike. I'll go with my original decision. And after making a bit of a round-the-world journey, the knight lands back on e4. I do now have some weaknesses he can play against, so I'm not that happy about this outcome, frankly. And I'm now, yeah, I'm not sure about this. This is a bit overly optimistic, I feel. He should have taken with the rook. I was still much better after it, but you still need to take with the rook and go for that endgame. I'm also winning on time, but I think objectively it's not that relevant here because I'm... Whoa, that's a very nice trap. Knight b7, knight f4, I suddenly lose. But the thing about this position is that this rook endgame is just completely dead. Just very, very dead. I think the easiest way to win this is just to simplify into this. Because his pieces are so far away that... whoops, not blundering the f2 pawn is kind of important here. I can start with g6, I guess. And it looks like I flagged him by guessing his pre-move, but g6 actually made a point because I think this is just completely winning for me because then I will start pushing, and if he goes h6, I actually took away the f7 square from him, so I can start once again with the plan of playing king f5, king e6, eventually getting the king to f7 and winning like that. Okay, one final one and we're done for the day. Too many white games, but it does say random, so the RNG is strong with this one today. I don't know why I'm playing the tromp. I have nothing in the tromp. Yeah, this is the one line I've seen people play, so I will be able to blitz out some moves here. And it's a reasonably interesting line at that, so I'm quite happy we're getting it. Because, you know, compared to the normal tromp positions, this at least shows promise in terms of, you know, non-standard structures and even non-standard material balance. I think you're supposed to play h4 after knight g5. I think it's important to do it with a knight steal on g1, because I don't want to allow g5, g4, obviously. This is a very, very sharp line, which I've seen people go for. It's still sort of, it doesn't mean I know what's happening here, but it's, you know, I'm curious enough. This is probably wrong. Already this move I'm completely unsure about. Because he doesn't really have to react to it. Knight f4 might be a good move, but in particular if he just leaves it on g5, I'm really unsure whether I have anything in particular, because I don't really want to take on d5. It kind of robs my knight on d2 of all the squares that piece wants to go to. Here I wanted to go knight e4, but then I spotted that he can play queen a5 and queen takes e5, which makes knight e4 completely unplayable. So I'll start with this. And now I think I can play knight e4, although it still doesn't really give me, you know, anything particularly great. But at least the same tactic, it might still work. He can take knight takes e5. I think he missed a possible very interesting tactical opportunity on this move. He could have taken it with a knight on e5, with a queen steal on d8. And if I recapture, only then he can play queen a5 check. And here, once again, he can play queen a5, which regrettably, I think, probably forces an endgame of some sort. But it's a sharp endgame. In which, objectively, black probably does excellently well, to be honest. I'm pretty sure that with correct play, this is just not very feasible for white. I quite like b6. It shows, you know, great awareness. He doesn't need to react to what I'm doing in the center at all. At least not for now. And sadly, I feel like I need to trade this this bishop in just to... It's not really about the d4 pawn. It's about relieving pressure black had against my e5 pawn. That was a lot more relevant to the evaluation there. But now he is stabilized and I have to pay attention to my weaknesses on g2 and so on. So I think objectively I should be lucky if I'm not worse here. It's just not a very nice endgame. Rook h8 comes to mind. Rook g7 comes to mind. There's a number of moves here which bother me. But in particular rook h8, because after takes takes I have no comfortable way of dealing with the issues. But that's just a blunder, I feel. I think it's extremely likely that he just forgot I can take on f4 in this position. And now suddenly I'm a pawn up for, frankly, not a lot. And yeah, this rook endgame is not great for black. I thought rook h5 just won on the spot, but it doesn't because there's f5, which makes me wonder if I should start with rook f6 and then go for... But I can combine every single idea. I can go rook h8 check, and only now I can go rook f6. And this way I stop the king from getting to e7, which means that his pieces are completely tied up. And then I can just quietly start bringing the king over. I think he probably wants to go king d5 here, but then after rook f3, I think I would have just won material. And here the funny thing is, yes, I gave him the h-file, but it still doesn't give him any counterplay whatsoever. And even rook d2 is an absolutely empty gesture, which doesn't really lead to any counterplay. I can play rook f8 at more or less any point and drive the rook back to d7. And just continue slowly improving, whereas he just has no moves. I will eventually have to come up with a plan to win, but for the time being I can just continue improving slowly. Probably trading one pair of rooks is a decent idea here. Just play rook d3 against... Yeah, I don't understand. I mean... It's not the first blunder in this game, but that one didn't really make much sense. And yeah, that probably is a wrap. I've done reasonably well today in terms of results, and I don't think the quality was even that horrible, which is surprising after the Blitz. So thanks for sticking with me. I didn't really pay much attention to chat today, but I promise to do better in the future. And those of you who are already premium, tune in tomorrow for our coverage of the starting Norway Classic 2017, arguably the strongest tournament that will be held in 2017. And if you're not premium, consider becoming premium, because I think it's great value for a very reasonable amount of money. Hashtag sellout. Cheers everyone, see you tomorrow.